Hey there, fellow educators, and honestly, anyone who's ever wondered what would happen if we actually listened to teachers for once. I'm Leah Cleary, and this is If Teachers Ruled the World. You know, after 25 years in the classroom, I've learned that teaching isn't really about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to ask the right questions, and maybe, just maybe, admitting when we have no idea what we're doing, which, let's be honest, happens more often than we'd like to admit. So grab your coffee, or whatever, and let's talk about the real stuff, the messy, imperfect, sometimes beautiful reality of what it's like to shape young minds while trying to keep our own sanity intact. Because if we're going to change the world, we might as well be honest about what that actually looks like. All right, let's dive in. Hey teachers, welcome back to If Teachers Ruled the World. I'm Leah Cleary, and this is our monthly wellness episode where we get real, get vulnerable, and talk about what's really going on in our hearts and minds as educators. I have to be honest with you. I usually stay off social media because I don't like the trolls and the nasty climate of people just being mean for the sake of being mean. But I went ahead and posted some things about this podcast on social media anyway. And wow, the hate I'm getting and the assumptions people are making about it are pretty incredible. I'll go ahead and say that I have been called a groomer, and that Trump should round me up with the rest of the liberal trash. I mean, it's mean stuff. People don't realize that the title, If Teachers Ruled the World, is tongue-in-cheek. It's a wink to teachers. This podcast is for teachers. And those of us in the classroom know that we have very little say and very little control over what happens. It's not like the legal profession where the bar is made up of lawyers. Our rules are largely set by non-educators. If social media haters actually listened to the show, they'd understand that it's not really political. It's about giving teachers a voice in education policy. Will it lead to change? Probably not, but it's a platform for us. And it's not from the standpoint of a Democrat or a Republican. Believe it or not, I am neither. But seeing those comments, honestly, it really didn't surprise me, and it did make me laugh a little because they're so far off base from what this show's even about. This show, remember, is for teachers. And teachers, I hope, get the tongue-in-cheek nature of the title. But it also made me think, dang, I can't even put something out there for teachers without getting attacked. Something with the goal of helping teachers and giving teachers a voice. But here's what really struck me about this experience. It made me realize that in this day and age, you can say, oh, it's a beautiful day on social media, and you're opening yourself up to attack. That's what the leftist agenda wants you to believe, or that's right-wing propaganda. Somehow everything has been politicized. There are so many trolls and people just being contrary for the sake of it. You can't really do anything without opening yourself up to some kind of criticism. And maybe, honestly, things have always been this way. But I think regular people like you and me are experiencing it more now because of social media and our ability to publish content, to blog, to podcast, and put ourselves out there. Regular people are getting a similar kind of hate that used to be reserved for people in the limelight, for celebrities, for journalists, and for politicians. And our students, they're dealing with this too. I think that's one reason why anxiety and depression have become almost epidemic, because kids can't even go home and be safe from scrutiny if they've put anything online. The trolls come out of the woodwork and say things purposefully to get under people's skin. That's what they do. But I can't even imagine what it's like to be a kid these days. I have the life and the background and the context to laugh some of these things off and to recognize the absurdity. But what about kids? For us as teachers, this climate of constant scrutiny, it really does mirror our classroom reality because a lot of people completely misunderstand what we do. They take one or two cases that make the news or that make the rounds on social media and they apply it to all teachers, to all educators. That's a shame, but people have a tendency to do that with anything. We're good as human beings at generalizing from a few cases. What this means for teachers specifically is that we censor ourselves. My husband is a U.S. history and economics teacher, and he gets nervous about having to teach certain topics like slavery or the civil rights movement, because even if you're just saying, this happened in 1852, here's what happened, somehow there is always the danger of somebody twisting what you're saying around. And here's a perfect example. Back when my husband was teaching civics, our government in some counties, most teachers would show CNN Student News. Now it's called CNN 10. If you've ever seen it, it is really an apolitical show. It summarizes what's going on in the news with no spin. Just, hey, this is the news and maybe a human interest story. Some of the most politically conservative teachers I've ever worked with, and they are not a rare breed here in Georgia. I know everyone thinks that all teachers are liberal, but that's not even close to true. Again, generalizations. Showed that in their classes. They did. It was just standard practice in civics and government classes nationally. But it had CNN in the name, and parents complained, assuming that it was partisan. It was absurd because anyone who actually watched it would know it wasn't politically slanted at all. This scrutiny is not new for teachers. It's just been amplified by social media. Teachers have always expected to be role models and examples. We've always been held to some level of scrutiny. Think about back in the day when teachers had to quit if they got married. I remember when Facebook became a thing, probably a few years into my career. I'm going to say, I think it was really around 2007. Teachers were getting fired for posting pictures of themselves drinking out of red Solo cups. We had a lawyer who would come to our school during pre-planning and discuss some of these things with us, and we were warned not to do that. And I'm hearing about this and thinking, but there's iced tea in my red Solo cup. And even if there weren't, why are we under that amount of scrutiny on our own time? After that, anytime I had a drink in my hand, and I'm talking about a bottle of water, and I saw somebody was going to take a picture, I'd put that sucker down because I didn't want anyone to read it the wrong way. My non-teacher friends and family used to make fun of me for that. Now people are saying things like, the pandemic showed us that teachers were indoctrinating our kids. If you trace that idea back to its roots, there were a few instances of that happening that went viral on social media. But think about all the hundreds of thousands of classrooms out there and think about how many that does not happen in. If you can point to one or two examples during the pandemic, that's an anomaly, not something we should all get blamed for. Here's the truth, and I've heard it from many teachers. If we could indoctrinate students to do anything, it would be to care. It would be to do their work, to study, to read every day and write every day and flex their critical thinking skills. You want to know what's really doing the indoctrinating? Those little devices in their pockets do a much more efficient job than I ever could. These kids have powerful devices full of content. They can connect to any number of opinions in a second. Social media has algorithms. Google has algorithms. That shows students what they're interested in and puts them into echo chambers. That's what's doing the indoctrinating, not teachers. I can't even get them to read 3 pages of their assignment after giving them class time to start it. But somehow I'm supposed to be masterminding their political beliefs? If I had that kind of influence, trust me, they'd be reading every single night. Just reading. They don't think about my class when they go home. The vast majority just don't. They're not reading. They're not studying. They're on those devices. Their parents actually have a lot more power over what they do in their free time than we ever will as teachers, because we get them for about an hour a day, 5 days a week, for 10 months of their lives. But you know what? Teachers, we're going to get through it. It'll be okay. I'm confident because we have always been scrutinized. Anyone who works with children is going to be. That's a reality, especially during socially tumultuous times. And we are living in socially tumultuous times. We're easy scapegoats. The things that actually are at fault are much too vague, much too difficult to control. The internet is too difficult to control. The technology students have access to is much too difficult to control. It's neater, tidier, and simpler to blame teachers. We can fire this one teacher or pass this one policy or pull kids out of public school and homeschool them or put them in private school. Problem solved, and we all feel really good about it. But no, the problem's not solved because they're still members of our society. Kids are going to get influenced by what they choose to follow, what they choose to spend their time on, who they decide to listen to. And that, my friends, is generally not teachers. When people misunderstand what this podcast is about, thinking it's some political agenda when it's literally just for teachers, a place to feel encouraged and heard, it perfectly illustrates the point. Even when I do an episode analyzing how a policy might affect classrooms, that's not about getting people to vote a certain way. The third episode every month is just, hey, if this policy happens, this is the impact it can have on your classroom. When you look at things from that practical perspective, you can see it's not the end of the world either way generally, and things are going to be okay. We know what we're about. We're not trying to indoctrinate kids. We want them to learn how to read and write. I could care less how they vote. I want them to vote. I want them to be good citizens of our country and their communities, and that does not mean being a carbon copy of me. That means participating, making their own judgments, coming to their own conclusions. To do that, kids have got to have critical thinking skills. They've got to be able to read and write, to pick out arguments and determine if evidence adequately supports those arguments. Is the evidence even true? How do they fact check it? We need to give them the tools for that, not to tell them what to believe, and I think most teachers agree with me on that. I don't want to teach robots I can program. That's boring. I want my students to be critical thinkers. So here's what I want you to know about navigating this climate. We're going to get through it. We'll support each other. We've got our community. There's so much division and hate and blame right now, but let's just keep doing our jobs. This podcast is for you. This community is for you. People outside of this community have a lot of misunderstandings, but we know the truth about what happens in our classrooms. Keep up the good work. The good work is just teaching kids, not teaching them what to think, but teaching them how to think. Critical thinking, literacy, all of that. That's our job. Let's keep our heads down, stay focused, and support each other as best we can. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. That's it for this week on If Teachers Ruled the World. Be sure to subscribe, share with a teacher friend, and join the conversation at leahcleary.com. Until next time, keep ruling your classroom and rewriting the rules.